Shout out to Borkmondo for this video inspiration. NAVI video has finally arrived, and it arrives at a time where NAVI have won the Esports World Championship, which you're allowed to name anything, whatever you want, okay? But with the format and the crowd and the lack of prestige, this is not a esports world championship for Counter-Strike, though it is still a very good run for NAVI. We look at the teams that they beat right now coming into season 2 of CS2. I love calling it seasons. Gonna keep it like this. I'm a big TV watcher, okay? I love seasons. Okay, NAVI, after winning the esports World Championship, are now the #1 team in the world on HLTV. I think if they had beat Spirit, then I would say all right, but they bump up 4 spots after taking some very solid wins, making a super good run, and are the officially HLTV #1 team in the world. Now, when it comes to #1 on HLTV, this has not meant much for about 4 years now, right? When we're talking about pre-online era Counter-Strike, the #1 team in the world actually made a lot of sense because that's where all the eras were. After we had Stockholm and we had NAVI being the #1 team in the world and their super close to an era type of run, we had a semi-online Grand Slam run. We had the slight drop-off after 2021 into Antwerp, which was actually a 2nd place finish, which was this amazing moment because it was Kerrigan's story of overcoming choking and winning his major, you know, right after Simple wins his major, which are 2 incredibly important storylines that we needed to tie up that we did together. We did it, guys. We were on the team. And while we're in the spring of 2019 and we're watching Liquid win, and we're in the winter of 2021 and we're watching Navi win, it feels like you're in the era 100%. When it's over, that's when you look back and you tie it off and you say, okay, here is what we got. And the feeling afterwards was that it didn't feel quite the same as something like Fnatic's time at the top, or when we talk about Astralis' time at the top. And yeah, the game has changed so much and got way harder. And it was very difficult to be able to say that you could even achieve an era. But you know what? When Astralis put together their era, no one thought that that was possible either. And they proved to put together the strongest era possible. So I think we'll see as time goes on if anybody else can make an era happen again in Counter-Strike. But I think that it will, especially now that we're in CS2. And that's where I want to start talking about this video, because we are talking about NAVI in CS2, and for the first time in this organization's history, having an international lineup. ACEZONE has released a wireless Aspire. Code launders 10% off the best CS2 headphones on the market now in wireless. Don't miss out. Johnny, play the video.
Noise cancellation is perfect. You hear every single step like you're at home. It's crazy. I'm in LAN. People screaming everywhere. I barely fucking hear them. This is perfect. Please buy ACEZONE code launders. Greatest code in the world. Buy it right now.
BOXR Movement.club. We got the BOXR Betting Club, a collaboration between me and Rivalry, put together some beautiful stuff on the store, including the esports betting expert hat. That's available for purchase. Don't miss out. It'll be gone soon. But not only an international lineup that has been marred with doubt. A team that, when we talk about the first event that they attend in CS2, IEM Sydney, this is the event, and this is the drama around the event, okay? This is Aleksi B's international roster. JL, wonderful. Bit, who had to just cram Duolingo to learn English to be able to stay on this roster. Navi posted his English test results on YouTube, and he got kind of mad about it after and said, hey, my English is fine, all right? We've got this ragtag group of guys, super random, honestly, coming together to try to pull off the impossible, and that is transition Navi from best organization probably consistently overall throughout CSGO, the team that attended every single damn major, to a team now that had to go international, a team that had to trust in Aleksi B and trust in Imma as a superstar from the Paris major at the end of CSGO. They had to trust in these players to achieve what they weren't able to do before. And for Aleksi B, that was win a map in a major grand final. That was for Imma to show that he wasn't a one-hit wonder. That was goes to show that they could all communicate in this new foreign language called English together and compete with a field that is Mao's looking strong, Complexity looking strong early, FaZe making every single grand final, Shiro going to Spirit and meeting up with Donk, who became the absolute standout story of this year. NAVI had a plate full of food, and they almost didn't have enough appetite, right? But Sydney was where things got even worse than they started, if that's fair to say. Okay, we're in a situation where, for whatever reason, and we don't know for sure, Simple drops out of playing at Sydney due to the fact that they had visa issues and he couldn't get to Australia. Now, this is a huge blow to Aleksi. Aleksi's like, what the fuck? I just lost my best player. Everything's on the rocks right now, right? We're talking about Aleksi, who's gone from OG to G2 to NAVI, being doubted the whole time and getting promoted to really, really good lineups each and every time, and Blade believing in him. That's like the biggest vouch that you can get. If you want to ask me, Zonic, Blade, these are like the two biggest vouches you could possibly get. And a lot of trust was placed on Aleksi, but look what happens to him. His star opper, the #1 player in the history of the game, ends up leaving after claiming visa issues in Sydney, not coming back to the game, says he wants to go work on something else, comes out with this course called Play Like Simple, which is like a Skillshare course. They don't sponsor this video. Hey, no free brand deals, okay? It's a YouTube course, and Jay makes fun of this, and he says, whatever Simple does, I'll do on YouTube for free, okay? And that's why apparently he dropped out, because he's working on this big project. I mean, it's great to listen to somebody like Simple talk about the game, but in the end, this is just a series of tutorials, okay? Which sort of feels like a signifying retirement, right? And if he had come back to NAVI after the visa issues in Sydney, I think it'd been warranted that we say, okay, you know, the GOAT returns, and it was just a hiccup, but he's back and trying to play CS2, but he doesn't return to NAVI. He releases this course and just sort of ditches the team. And this is really, really sad because, well, since then, we've had Simple not participating in CS2, playing one online match versus Metasport and getting bodied, dropping the Play Like Simple course, and not getting on to a new team. Okay, there should have been a beautiful finish here. If he was really going, this is just an aside, but there should have been a beautiful ending to Simple's career or time on NAVI or something, right? This was a foot out of the door. I don't believe in the roster. I don't really know what I want to do next. Situation where he's dedicated his career to playing for this org. NAVI's Ukrainian org, Simple's Ukrainian. Simple's the best player in the world. Like, come on, man. They could have built a statue for him, made a nice frag movie, made this a big post, put a stamp on it. There was no closure there when Simple left the team. Okay, so I'm just kind of mad about that, but that's just all to say that he leaves them high and dry and creates a situation where Aleksi has to find a new route to creating a great team, okay? And this is where they pull in Wonderful. And this team right now, in my opinion, is totally dysfunctional, okay? I mean, I don't know if Bit is really going into Duolingo every night and just cramming as many lessons that he can to get his English level up, and that's the reason that his individual performance isn't great. And if the only reason we talk about Emma is because of Shuhei, and he knew how to use him as an aggressive lurker on T side, and when he came on to NAVI, they try to shove him in similar roles, but made him a little bit more passive because it's a lot more of a slow playing team that NAVI are, and he just couldn't thrive in it, and he was sort of a one-trick pony. You know, I don't know. It's really hard to say, but the culmination of this is them getting Wonderful having some set pick plays that he would do as an opper on this lineup. And in moments, we saw Wonderful before he was on NAVI, coming into NAVI. This guy was clearly very, very skilled, right? I mean, he was just the 49th Ukrainian opper to use Simple sensitivity 3.09 and then, you know, say, I don't want to be called Simple, and everyone called him XQC. And then he was just quietly on NAVI. He's the player who was a little bit too passive, very talented, but totally different in style to Simple, not the elite superstar that Simple was. And as the year started and the months rolled on before we got to the major, we wondered if there was any hope for this lineup. There's no Simple on this team. Imma's a fraud. Aleksi keeps getting promoted even though he hasn't done anything. Bit cannot speak English and frag at the same time. There were so many questions about whether or not this was going to work. And then the major happened and they won. And regardless of what you think, and I've got thoughts that I'll tell you, they do the impossible, and this run is a straight up miracle. This is my characterization of it, okay? We're talking about a team that lost more rounds than they won. We had one of the most stacked playoff brackets in the history of the game, and NAVI were far away from favorites. We had a tournament where Imma who had multiple star player positions on all these maps, was not fragging at all, okay? We had a situation where JL ends up winning and getting MVP as an entry fragger on the team who ironically got picked up out of Paris after fragging on Apex without having good stats. This was, interestingly enough, the key pickup for Navi. It was actually the fact that they got JL, who has been a pure impact player, but not supposed to be the #1 star player on the team. On a roster where Wonderful, who's replacing Simple, who would be the stats leader, having very inconsistent performances throughout the event, right? When we talk about the PGL Copenhagen Major being a fluke, it's to say that this run wouldn't happen twice because the odds say that it wouldn't happen twice because there were unsustainable individual performances. It was a miracle, but it was still great. They pulled off something that was pretty extraordinary. I saw Aleksi at the after party and he said, bro, I had 2 shirts on and 1 shirt. I knew I didn't want to take it off because I knew I was going to win the major. And then he went up on stage and he had the other shirt underneath and he was swinging the first one, and it was like unreal, right? That he set this up and Aleksi B wins his major. He gets not only a map and a grand final, but wins the damn thing. And I mean, it's jubilation and it's an incredible thing that happened. But in terms of watching that run as a commentator who was there, watching the matches that they played, I was just like, no way they even make it out of the first round in playoffs. So yeah, they did get it together, but that team, in my opinion, is not the team that we see today. And after the major ended, of course, that's when some of the losses came in. And I do want to extend an olive branch to any team post-major. And that's that after the major, usually there's a drop-off, okay? Unfortunately, in Navi's situation, they still needed to prove more. I hate to say it. Winning the major was cool, but the lead into the major, the opening stages before playoffs, the fall off after the major, all it says is that it was extremely unlikely. You know, I personally used to get upset when people called Cloud9's run a fluke, right? Thorin would say Cloud9's run was a fluke in 2018. I thought he was just a salty European, okay? I thought he was a salty European and he really wanted the storyline of Kerrigan winning and Olaf winning and Guardian getting his chip, and you know what I mean? I could sympathize, but I was also like, we just witnessed the best thing to ever happen in North America, so I didn't really care. And it was like, oh, why are you stealing their thunder? This is not cool. Well, the truth is that was a fluke, right? That was a fluke. They didn't end up winning again. I mean, I had Stewie tell me personally, I think FaZe choked. You know, and they did choke. They did choke. And they choked again. 2 of the craziest runs to ever happen, and it's Kerrigan choking in both of them. Kerrigan crumbled on stage in that grand final versus Navi, and as much credit as I want to give Navi for having a legit run in playoffs in terms of quality of opponents, when they played against FaZe, that was not the real FaZe. Blade has a comment when he talked about the major where he said that he felt like this, you know, happened sooner than he expected, the win at the major, right? Just to speak to the confidence a little bit from the outside of the team coming into this massive event, and I totally mirrored that. And then when Blade said after EWC that he's filled with overwhelming pride that they've reached #1, even though it's not a totally solid #1, the fact is they're just way more consistent and really good, and they've got some amazing wins in terms of best of 3s versus the top teams under their belt recently. I'm feeling the confidence now. Like I really am seeing that this team is truly working. I've got to be honest here. There's no way that I would compare the Navi that we saw at PGL Copenhagen to the one that I just watched at EWC, and I'm cautiously optimistic that the team can have consistent results that can lead forward into the second season. And this is through, again, a very stacked field that is quite difficult to be able to say, I'm going to stick and be #1. And if they continue to have any kind of consistency whatsoever, they will actually be a real #1 in the world. And I understand why Blade has that overwhelming pride, because for him, he's the most special story of all, okay? The first time I've ever heard Aleksi say anything good about a coach was for Blade, where he said that Blade has made me a better in-game leader, okay? And I want to say that means a lot. Knowing Aleksi, he's somebody who has a very sort of strong mind, believes in himself and his process and getting better, but I've never heard that kind of respect from him about anybody else in the past, and I can see the difference in the gameplay when it comes to Aleksi. Blade gives him more vision on the rounds, okay? He was too narrowed in the past when it came to trying to call entire T-halves. You'd see some great rounds and you see some terrible rounds, and you see some great rounds, see some terrible rounds. Blade, in my opinion, improves their defaults. It gives Aleksi a little bit more perspective and increases the vision, and I think that you're seeing now that you're getting more halves that feel like a Kerrigan called half, a Shuhei called half, one that in my opinion is a total masterclass, where we saw Aleksi be as a master tactician who could put together one amazing round, but then the follow-up didn't seem to match the last. There was something going wrong there, I think, and I think that that has been improving. So I'm really liking what we're seeing out of him, and for me, the whole idea of Blade is what's so special, because he's somebody that clearly had the bones to be an amazing coach in the future. And this is part of the reason why I feel like NAVI are the greatest org in Counter-Strike history, because all the signings that they made, the amount of teams that they've improved that aren't even their own, even Monacy, the fact that they've raised him up, the fact that the Academy League was a thing and NAVI Jr. were so good and had so many good players on it, the fact that Blade was going down to help them, the fact that they picked Blade out from Flipside, who was able to qualify to majors but not do much else outside of that. The guy who, when he used to call as an IGL and as an individual fragger, was horrible. As an IGL would also put together some good rounds, but honestly, all the time would call rounds where they didn't have enough time to put together idea he wanted to. He couldn't stand up to the idea that Counter-Strike is real-time chess, right? He could play chess, but he needed more of a clock to be able to put things together. And I feel like as a coach, it's the perfect role for him. Look at his Instagram. This is the other thing we love about Blade. He's got a photo every time he wins a tournament of him holding the trophy. That's the only thing on his Instagram. It's one of the best pieces of lore about Blade. And this is somebody who got his major in CSGO, has now won the first major in CS2. He's somebody who, off of tac pauses as a commentator, when I talk about it, I always say it's Blade tac pause. Let's see what they do next. And I feel like he's improved the round. Somebody who has garnered the respect of Aleksi B, who's someone who's clearly understands how to build a great team in a way that most other coaches haven't proven that they can do. And he did this. One of the biggest challenges that you could possibly do is make an international lineup without Simple and with Bit, who literally had to learn English to play on this team, turn them into a winning roster, and now has touch number one. So I gotta say, a lot of this NAVI story for me is about Blade, but I also want to give credit to everybody who has been improving in their roles on this team, and that goes for everybody. So, and after a pro league, then at Dallas, it was like, all right, this is what we expected. NAVI falling off, and everyone was calling doom on NAVI, and it wasn't improving. But the first signs that things actually were going to get better was back at Blast London, where they made the grand finals. And I think that if they had won, obviously, I think that was their chance to sort of beat the fluke allegations from the first season of CS2. And after the break, the thing is, for me, in terms of just watching, they're a better team. They're a lot better. We're also seeing the fact that Ima is starting to step up in his star player positions, that he's starting to get more comfortable. And after winning EWC, I think the most interesting thing for me was seeing the odds change. And I bring up the odds a lot because if you want to know what people really, truly believe, all you have to do is look at the betting odds. That's something, as somebody who does some sports betting, so the BOXR betting club expert himself, odds will tell you the truth in terms of what people truly believe when they put something on the line. And I think the most interesting thing for me in this last run was people's confidence in NAVI playing against MOUZ. Now, they not only won that game, and I did tweet that I actually thought they were trending in the right direction and would win it, but NAVI, in my opinion, are a solid team right now, and they will move up to odds favorites as this season rolls on. And I think they are up there with Spirit. I wouldn't call them number one over Spirit right now, but we will see as Cologne takes place, as we see it at fall groups, as we move into the Shanghai Major. That will say a lot. Maybe we are in a special position. I'm still not forecasting any kind of era because they don't have the quality of players that other rosters have, but in my opinion, touching number one at all, even if it's only on HLTV, is still already so much more than you could expect from a lineup like this. And when we're watching the quality of rounds, I'm seeing it go up. I'm seeing a team that's more consistent. I'm seeing a team that's more sustainable, and that's the word for me. So NAVI, very much looking forward to season 2 to see if NAVI can be a major contender. And I think this is leading Blade to be potentially put in the conversation for GOAT coach in the history of the game, in the same way that Kerrigan is in the conversation over Glaive after all these years. If we're talking about GOAT overall, we talk about Zonic and CSGO, that's done. Talk about Glaive and CSGO, for me, that's done. But when we combine CSGO and CS2 in this history, and Kerrigan still going and Blade still going, GOAT overall, that's still up for grabs. I think Blade is making an argument for himself. So let's see how much more they can impress us and what they can do, because we are seeing the best made out of an interesting group of players, and they aren't calling on the best player in the world to make it happen.